Okay, so now we've got, let's see, agenda item number 5, the service objectives accomplishments report.
Okay. Thank you very much. I would like to draw your attention to a few items that are contained in the accomplishments report. I know that you had a chance to review, so I won't go point by point, but I would like to highlight a few things. For example, in the 14-15 fiscal year, there were a number of opportunities internally for staff to work together and collaborate to review on ways to improve service and improve the quality level of the services that we provide to members. Staff continue to refine our processes and document internal controls to strengthen our core business practices. I think that the data you saw in the report reflects that. We have a number of cross-functional teams that are collaborating on the service performance objectives. For example, the point in the previous item where we talked about combining member account services with financial services to more accurately reflect the workflow associated with that service objective. I would also like to talk a little bit about, kind of from an overall perspective, as Jack alluded to, many of our, for the first time, this is really the best performance year that we've had. And so for the first time, a number of targets were met. And for some of those performance objectives where we came in under target, we are trending in the right direction. So we improved year over. I would also like to highlight that a number of the benefit areas did meet target for the first time, so we're very pleased about that. And I'd like to give a special shout out to our contact center, our customer service division. As Jack said, they've had the best year ever. And I know Cynthia is in the audience, and her leadership team as well deserve a lot of credit for doing the heavy lifting to turn those numbers around. When you look at the service levels of the contact center over the last few years, the performance of the past fiscal year is truly, I believe, nothing short of remarkable. The leadership team has really taken steps to enhance collaboration with staff and improve engagement of staff, and I think that's reflected in the metrics and in improved satisfaction from members. We also saw a significant increase in members self-serving online, as Elisa pointed out in the survey. That has additional implications. As Elisa pointed out, some of the slight decrease in overall satisfaction with interacting with CalSTRS may be in part related to more members self-serving for the kind of easier things to do, as opposed to when they need to, when there's a complex issue and they need to interact with staff. Sometimes those interactions aren't quite as easy or easy to get through. I also wanted to point out that we have implemented creditable comp regulations. Ed and I will talk about that shortly. The Member Account Services Division did a number of educational efforts in this past year, and while we still have opportunity around there, we have learned some great lessons in terms of improving effectiveness of that outreach in the coming year. We have also, the benefits and services areas have worked with internal audits to enhance and refine controls, checks, and balances. That's something that's important for us, and we think will help improve service. I'd also like to draw your attention to the fact that our new Irvine Member Service Center just completed its first full year of operations. We are seeing a significant amount of walk-in traffic. So I think that speaks to the fact that we have located the Member Service Center in an ideal spot. So we look forward to more members coming in and being able to serve those members with our high level of quality. And then moving forward. Andrew, yes, of course.
On the on slide BNS 39, the goal attainment, when you were going through that. I was just struck by looking at it. 39 and 40 are all this, it's all one chart, right? It's just 2 pages of the same chart?
Correct.
Is that right? Okay. I was just trying to, because on the first page, it looks like everything's up or new, but our overall member satisfaction went down. But is that due to some of the changes on the second page?
So when you say overall member satisfaction went down, were you
So
speaking
I'm
to?
just reading the chart on BNS 39 at the top, right? Goal attainment, the first one. The first
Oh,
one
yes,
says
overall
overall member
member
satisfaction. I'm
satisfaction.
just trying to read, I love colors and charts and stars and shapes. I mean, it helps delineate, but I think I'm just trying to understand how it seems like we're doing so well in so many things, but to me, overall member satisfaction, that's the big kahuna, right? That
Yeah.
in general, how are we doing? And it seems like that went down. So I was just kind of curious, given all the positive things that are happening, why in aggregate it seems like that it just kind of it went down.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and that's one where, per Elise's presentation, where we were just talking about kind of, while individual metrics are trending up and we are doing better at, for example, with processing times for specific activities, overall member satisfaction has slightly dipped, and we think in part that's due to more members self-serving, more members going online to get the easy things done, and so the more complicated questions are coming into the building, and those sometimes result in a longer process or multiple contacts, which tends to decrease the quick and easy kind of satisfaction. And it's something that we'll be continuing to monitor as we move forward because, for example, one of the last points I wanted to make was as we move forward with our pension solution project, many of our most talented staff will be asking more of them. In addition to the excellent customer service they provide, they'll also be needed to do things like review requirements, help in conceptual design for the new system. And so we want to make sure that we maintain our excellent customer service levels while we go through the project. So we'll be watching these metrics very carefully so that when we see dips, we're able to deploy our mitigation strategies.
But Andrew, if I could, Sharon, if you also look at the historical nature of that statistic on page 41, it is down only because it's A versus B. In other words, the number is 67 in 12-13, 67 in 13-14, and this year 66. So it's 1 percentage point change. So that resulted in that red delta you saw in the chart you were looking at. But I think
comparing it to the target, the 75%.
well, the target
is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah, that's so. Yeah, that's. I want to make sure you didn't
No, I
think the
think that's
delta
helpful.
was to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's to those other years. So 1 percentage points,
Yeah,
we'd say,
that's not-
let's keep
Sure.
seeing where we're going. I mean,
Sure.
clearly the weight of the performance is so sharply improved on so many measures that I would
Yeah.
not put too much weight on that one particular 1 percentage point change, personally.
So in summary, just wanted to highlight that we've had a terrific year, and we're very pleased about that. And by no means resting on our laurels, we're going to continue to provide excellent service, to watch the metrics carefully, especially, as I said, as we go into a project environment, an extended project environment over the next 5 years. Are there any other questions?
Any other questions for Andrew? I just want to say thank you for the report. Congratulations on the improvements that we've seen. So Cynthia, to you and your team, I'm sorry they can't be here, but I know that they're on the phones, answering the phone calls coming in right now. But when I'm not sitting here in my other job, I work for a company that also has to respond to a lot of customer and member questions, and I know how important it is to be able to respond quickly and accurately, and in a in a way that really satisfies and engages them. So I really appreciate the work that you all have done to make these improvements. Great job.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, item number 6. So I think this is both Andrew and Ed, the implementation of creditable compensation regulations.
Okay, so in terms of the outreach we've done with employers for creditable compensation regulations, I want to speak briefly to what we have accomplished in the past year. We have engaged in 64 training sessions with employers. Representatives from multiple county offices of education representing 92% of all employers attended those sessions. Since January of 2015, we've held a number of open forum question and answer sessions in Southern California, Central Valley, the Bay Area, in Northern California, as well as sessions at stakeholder conferences. It's our understanding that 73% of County Office of Education employers have participated in those learning opportunities. One of the other things that the Member Account Services Division has done in the past fiscal year is to create a specialized business unit. And the focus of that business unit is communicating with employers on creditable compensation regulations. That unit provides telephone and email support and is also responsible for providing the education to employers. Staff in this unit discuss and meet with constituent representatives on a regular basis to answer questions concerning creditable compensation. This Member Account Services team provides customized training, and they deliver that training through a variety of methods, including, of course, online webinars, but as well as in-person meetings. The customized training is developed using audit findings identified by CalSTRS, and then a staff analysis of member appeals along with common reporting issues. So over the past year, we've conducted a number of sessions, and we have identified opportunities to enhance and improve the communication, as well as some strategies going forward where we can provide a more comprehensive suite of services, and Ed will speak to that.
Yeah, so I just talk a little bit about where we're going to go forward from here, and there's a couple of areas that we're looking at. One is, we find often that there are discussions around employment agreements or collective bargaining agreements at the local level where there's an expectation that if something's handled in a certain way, in terms of compensations paid in a particular way, that it'll be treated in a particular way for retirement purposes, and then, as time goes on, and then we're looking at it, we determine it as not being treated the way they expected, and there's sort of unfortunate consequences to the member. So one of the things that we're going to be exploring on a pilot basis, and there's a lot of aspects of this thing that we need to work with the various stakeholder groups, is the idea of evaluating contemplated agreements, either collective bargaining agreements or employment agreements with individuals, that we could look at those proposals before they're finalized, and then we could tell them that if it's done this way, this is the way it's going to be, treated for retirement purposes, not necessarily dictating. They can pay people however they want to pay them, but if you do it this way, this is how it's going to be treated in terms of it's credible or it's not credible to CalSTRS, it goes to DB or it goes to DBS. Our hope is that by doing this ahead of time, as opposed to after the agreements have been signed, that they can avoid surprises down the road. But we want to do this on a pilot basis, first of all, because we're not quite sure the magnitude of the workload and how successful it will be. But also we want to work really closely with the stakeholders to make sure we're setting up the parameters, because we do not want to get in the way of a collective bargaining process. We don't want to interfere with that, and we want to make sure that we honor that process, but we want to be helpful so that people understand the consequences of their actions. The other thing that we're looking at, probably a little more certain, is that we want to create a publication that sort of translates the regulations into more plainer English so that people can go online, download the publication. Everybody will have access to how compensation is treated for purposes of what's credible, what's not credible, what goes to DB versus what goes to DBS. So everybody's got the same information from us in terms of this is how we look at it. And again, we're hoping that will avoid some of the problems that people have had in terms of trying to implement the regulations. We've also, in the course of the year that we've been working, or less than a year we've been working with it, we've sort of found a few things that we think we probably need to make some relatively minor tweaks to the regulation, because one of the things that we've learned in working with the regulations, and quite honestly, I think it may have been even a surprise to some of the stakeholder groups we're working with, is that the compensation practices of school districts is, to put it mild, varied. I mean, different. We have 1,700 districts, and they all pay in different ways, and that's, and I think it sort of surprised us, and I think, like I said, surprised some of the stakeholders, the variety of ways in which people get paid. So there's a few things that we need to look at. One of which, for example, there's compensation that's paid for some service which is clearly should be creditable, but don't meet the strict criteria that are outlined in the regulations to be creditable either as salary or remuneration addition to salary. So we need to sort of figure out how to make that work. And so we probably, once we sort of work all that out with the stakeholders about the modifications that are needed, come back with another regulatory modification to the board to try to address those. But I think on balance, I mean, there's always some rough spots. It was a significant change, and but I think that on balance, I think it's been working well. It has provided some clarity that we've put on paper what the rules are. But I think there's still some room that we can make some improvements that we're going to be pursuing. With that, be happy to answer any questions.
Got Sharon?
Yeah, I want to thank you, Ed, and your staff for helping with this, because it's just, for those of us who work in districts, it is, you said it really nicely, but it's all over the map in our state in terms of how pay is looked at, and often what happens that I hear about is a chancellor wants somebody to do a special something, and then a faculty member or a teacher does it that last year, and it totally messes up their entire retirement. And so a teacher wants to do a favor for an administrator, and he promises, or she promises something, and then we find out that it's not creditable comp. So I think, I love dealing with problems before they happen and try. I think information, knowledge, training helps us kind of. So I'm really excited about the proactive stance that we're taking. I think the translating into plain English is really important because our HR folks don't understand a lot of this language. Some of the teachers and faculty that are working on collective bargaining agreements don't necessarily understand CalSTRS, and so I'm glad that our stakeholder groups are engaged in helping. But I think as proactive as we can get, because those of us who sit on appeals, it breaks your heart, so we want to sort of have less of those cases and have more happy teachers and faculty retiring. So I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I'd love for our committee to hear back on the pilot, what districts you're going to do that with, and if you could sort of let us know how
Sure.
that's
Well, there's
going.
actually an item on the April agenda, sort of an update on all of this, so we can give you an update in terms of where things are.
Because I do think, I think it's always a partnership between, our districts, the faculty organizations, and then obviously CalSTRS, to kind of work on this issue together collaboratively. But I really appreciate, this has been a long time coming, but I appreciate all the work that the staff has been doing and the stakeholder groups as well, so.
Okay, I think we've got some members of the public.
Good morning, Jennifer Baker with the California Teachers Association. Really wanted to commend Ed and his team for the work that they've been doing on these issues. As you know, and as Ed very much knows, there have been a lot of hard discussions that we've had, and a lot of concerns that we've had and we've shared with you and with staff along the way. But what's really encouraging is this seems to be solidifying much more. So we're very much looking forward to ultimately what this pilot project may look like, and we appreciate Ed and his team's willingness to engage early and often in that process. And so we still want to get a better level of comfort as to what it's supposed to look like, and then what it will really look like when it happens in the field, because that's hard going from concept to reality, but we appreciate the willingness to engage and the willingness to collaborate with our management colleagues as well.
Salvia Senior with the Association of California School Administrators, and I also want to come up and echo what Jennifer's indicated about our support for this particular process. Sharon, I did want to comment about the challenges that you refer to, which is the difference from one particular part of the state, one district to another, and that's just the complexity of the system. When you have over 50% of our school districts that are small, they're not going to have the same level of structure that a much larger urban or suburban school district is going to have. They're not going to have the same needs. They're going to need different types of individuals to come in and provide support. So therefore, you're going to have different arrangements. The one group that has not been mentioned in this conversation, and I've mentioned this to Ed, and I think Jennifer would support me on this, is the school boards. The school boards are the body of government that makes a determination around contracts. They're the ones that make the final decision, not only about what the collective bargaining agreements might be, but also just the pay of the superintendent. And so I think it's extremely important that we work together to try to prevent problems from occurring, because at the end of the day, it's a cost. And it may be a cost to the individual, but it may be also a cost to the district, which ultimately means a cost to the students at the end of the day. So we look forward to working with the CalSTRS staff and our stakeholder colleagues on this and being able to report back to you on the progress we might be making. So thank you.
Pat Geyer, CalRTA retired teacher. You know, as I was sitting here, I feel more and more unhappy about those retirees and active teachers in the northern half of the state. Here we have these wonderful service centers, but the one that's furthest north is Sacramento, and we've forgotten that half of the state doesn't have a service center. And I know that population-wise, we can't afford to put a full-time service center in that area, but is there some way that, and I don't have an answer, that we can think of something, maybe once a month or some type of thing, where you could have some kind of contact for that huge it's not huge, but a very significant population in the northern half of the state. And we need some creative thinking on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
Peter Morse, Faculty Retirement Committee and current faculty member at Santa Monica College. I also wanted to commend CalSTRS for the attempt to communicate more effectively with the business units at districts. Our part-time faculty, it's a very different kind of situation compared to K-12 teachers, and so I really appreciate the fact that you're putting some time into trying to clarify and help clear up those issues that part-time faculty are having all across the system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone, for the comments. Any other questions from the committee? Then otherwise, I think in April we'll hear back on some of the progress of some of what you discussed. Okay. Okay, so let's see, moving on to the next item. Agenda item number 7, it's the policy on the lump sum death benefit. Ed?
Right. This is the first reading on a proposed policy to identify sort of provide guidelines to the committee about how to adjust the lump sum death benefit. We've scheduled a second reading at the next meeting in April, so you do have the right, if you're satisfied with the way things are, to adopt it today. But we anticipate that you may want to have some discussions and make final decisions in April. And there's absolutely no problem of deferring it till April and then awarding on that basis. But there's currently a policy. The board currently has a policy in terms of when the death benefit gets adjusted, but not in terms of how it actually gets adjusted. So we've looked at a couple of options. It hasn't been adjusted since 2002, and you'll see on page BNS 74 how much the benefit has changed over time. And like I said, it hasn't changed since 2002. It's been that way ever since. And so, and the reason why it hadn't been changed is because of the funding situation, the DB program. Now, clearly the program hasn't improved its financing significantly since then, but we have a mechanism in place to address the funding of the plan. So it seemed like an opportune time to consider whether or not you want to start making adjustments to the plan, to the benefits, and how those benefits get adjusted. So, we looked at a number of different bases upon which to adjust the benefit, one of which was based on the cost of various things that are related to the end of life, either the medical care that people receive at the end of their life or the cost of burials. There's a lot of information out there, but for a couple of reasons, we didn't think that was a suitable approach. For one thing, because the figures that we were able to identify aren't sort of official government figures. They're figures that derive from trade associations, so we don't have much assurance about their accuracy or their consistency from one time to the next. And the other one, more significantly, is that these costs aren't updated on a regular basis. You have the opportunity to adjust the benefit every year. It may be several years before there's new studies done to identify the increased cost of burials or the change in medical costs at the end of life. So we didn't think that was probably the best approach. The other approach in terms of basing an adjustment is what impact it has on the funding of the DB program. That's obviously a big priority for the board. Spent 10 years working to address the funding of the program, and now we've got a plan in place. And we would anticipate that the board would want to place a priority in ensuring that we can meet the objective of being fully funded by 2046 if the benefit was going to be adjusted. So what we had proposed is that for each year between now and 2046, when we developed the funding plan, we identified a sort of a projected funded ratio at the end of each year, assuming that we met all of our actuarial and demographic assumptions, in particular investment returns, that we would be at a certain funded ratio, which you can see if you just want to look in terms of the draft policy on page 83 and 84. So under the proposed policy, that if when we do the valuation in April, that we are exceeding our target, that investment returns or for whatever reason things are better than what we had projected at the time the funding plan was enacted, that if we're doing better than we had anticipated, then there would be an opportunity to increase the benefit paid on the death benefit, such that you could bring it back down to as low as to what the targeted funded ratio was. The one thing I want to make sure that the board is aware of is that once you've increased the death benefit, you can't reduce it unless inflation becomes highly negative, because ultimately you can adjust the benefit in accordance with the CPI, but you can't bring it down once you've already set the rate, as I said, unless the inflation becomes negative. So it's not a two-way street. It's an asymmetrical decision you're making. But that's something that at least provides some guidance. So if, for example, when you do the valuation in April, if we projected in the funding plan that we'd be 64.8% funded, if it turns out that we're doing better than that, then you would be able to adjust the lump sum death benefit to a degree such that you could bring the funded ratio down to as low as that, or you could do something in between that. But at least it would provide some mechanism that you could adjust the benefit and still have some expectation that you're still on target for meeting the full funding by 2046. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about that.
Any questions from the committee? Okay. Irena?
So Ed, when I was reading this, I was thinking about the exercise we went through in February and April on the additional credits for cash balance and DBS, and the kind of analysis that Milliman provided us, where we kind of looked at, if you did the credits like this is what the sensitivity would be to the funded status. And I wondered whether an analysis like that would make sense at the time of considering increasing the benefit, rather than, I feel like, maybe I should have started with this, but I feel like looking at an example that's a few years out, where we're only in the 60% range of funding, increasing a benefit, even if we had some good years that made us at 70, increasing a benefit that brings us back down to 65 just because we thought that's where we would be, doesn't seem prudent to me. It seems like we're acting too soon. The funding plan kind of needs everything to be, just right in order to get there in the 30 years. So if we instead looked at some sort of analysis, and I don't know if it would be on an annual basis, because I think that might be a lengthy and complicated process, but if we looked at analysis that said, okay, after 10 years of the funding plan, we're 110% funded, and so therefore an increase in the death benefit would not really jeopardize the funded status of the plan overall. Are those analogous kind of ways of thinking about it, or?
Well, and obviously, it'd be up to in terms of the board would want to. Depends on how much longer they want to wait before they possibly adjust the benefit.
Yeah.
We've had 37% inflation since the last time it was adjusted, and clearly from the from the constituent standpoint, I think they're anxious to have an adjustment made at some point. I think one approach might be, I think it might be addressing your concerns, is rather than having the policy allow the benefit to take the funded ratio all the way back down to the expected levels, to maintain some buffer still, so that if there is a period of time of bad years, you're still not necessarily taking yourself down to the expected level. You've got some room there to give. So rather than, like, say, for example, if the target, if the expected ratio was 65% and we were at 68%, that you couldn't bring it down. You maybe have a 2 percentage point buffer or something like that, and that would be the most you could increase the benefit. Something like that could be built in to sort of provide some further protection. Would be an approach, and we could certainly take a look at that.
And then another question is about, in terms of the way the draft policy changes are made here, is the thinking that, because it says in the write-up that the board would retain discretion to
Right.
make the change, but then there's a lot of shalls. The shalls are gone, but it still says the board adopt a lump sum. So I'm,
No, we struck
Is
out
it-
the some of the what you're seeing in the first. If you look at you're looking at page 83 and 84. If you look at the first three points, A, B, and C, it said shall, and we're crossing that out.
Right.
And the reason was, in discussing this with Brian, is that if you wanted to maintain discretion, you wanted to eliminate the shall and just say it's the policy that you do it, but you're not required to do it. So we were striking out. We were trying to avoid using the word shall, that it was basically a
but it
policy.
still says it's the policy that you do it if these percentages.
Right, well,
if the
I'll
math
defer
works
to-
out,
I
right?
mean,
So-
my understanding, and I defer to Brian, is that as long as it's not a shall, you'd still maintain some discretion about exercising it, but.
Well, but then the board has to set aside the policy, right? The board has to say, the policy says you do it under these circumstances, but the board's not going to take action, right?
Yeah, I think that's the default position in the policy is that the board's going to take action.
Right.
Yeah.
But sort of like on an annual basis, this would come before us and we would have to take action whether to.
But would
To
the policy
increase
have to
or
be
not.
revised in order to not exercise it?
Well, I think what we went through on the
Yeah.
DBS
I think that's an
cash
excellent
balance issue was that the policy said we would take
Right.
action, and then
Right.
concerns were raised about the way the policy calculated the benefit changes. So we had to say, let's reconsider the policy. We changed the policy, and then in June took action under the new policy. So if the policy says this, I would, even though it doesn't say shall, it is the policy that the board adopt. Then when the issue came before the board, we would be doing it unless we said we're going to not follow our policy.
Right.
So that to me is the same as a shall. It's making it clear that we're not going to, that if the ratios are what they are in this description, then it will happen. And I guess I would go back to the concerns I have that,
No, okay,
that
that's
this
fair.
is
I mean, we
not, this is not, to me, it's not, the funding status would not be secure enough under this scenario to go forward with a lump sum benefit change. Now, I recognize the issue that you raised about constituents and the concerns that it hasn't been raised in a long time, and I completely respect and understand that view. But it feels to me that our primary concern ought to be the funded status of the plan overall before we consider any kind of change to any
No,
other benefit.
Right, and I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm trying to figure out some way of balancing it where there's still some buffer, as I was suggesting, before it gets adjusted, that would allow it under the right circumstances that an adjustment could be made. Also, in terms of we could take a look at the drafting of the policy to make sure that the committee maintains reasonable discretion that doesn't require a complete rewriting of the policy if you decide that for whatever reason, like for example, if the market looks like it's going to do really badly next year, you just know that it's going to be a real problem, then you could decide to not proceed.
I mean, I haven't drafted anything or thought about what it would look like, but I think one approach might be to have a more general policy statement about how we would consider a change in the future. So rather than looking now at what a calculation would be, that we would say what would be the process we would use to determine whether we should enhance the benefit. And the process would be something more along the lines of what we did on cash balance and DBS, where we actually have an analysis of what the long-term effect on the the plan is by increasing the benefit.
Well, that is what this would be, though. I mean,
Yeah, but this is prescribing what it would be. This isn't bringing before the board the analysis. This is saying at these percentages, you're going to approve, you're
Right.
going to have the benefit increase. And so there are two issues. One is I'm not sure that I agree with that process, but the other issue is I don't think these percentages are at all within the realm that would make me comfortable with
Okay,
increasing
that's
the
fair. That's
benefit.
fine.
So I don't know what others think, but I think that I would like to see a different way of thinking about this issue.
Well, you know, if I could add, we're definitely not advocating this. I think Ed and his staff were trying to be responsive to what we saw the board was searching for at the last meeting, but this isn't something that we feel strongly about in terms of that you need to have this. I think, to me, this could get really complicated fast. I mean, to me, the threshold question for you is a little bit before this, which is the current framework, which is you do have a guidepost, the CPI, it's permissive, and you do a Milliman analysis of that each time to determine the impact. And you've looked at that and said, it's not time. So that's been the state of affairs. I guess the question I would ask, does this more complicated overlay add value to your decision-making process? If it doesn't, then it's just getting more complicated by the minute with more actuarial analyses, and maybe the current law works for you. You know, that's where we were last time. There was some suggestion, Dana's not here today, but, Dana felt, let's look at a policy and let's look at a little more definition to this. So this starts you down that road, but I see the complications of going down this road as well. We're getting now into vested benefit issues. We're getting into the so I guess I hope you'll give us guidance today whether you want us to dig farther down into the detail of this and make it better, cleaning up permissive language, or does the threshold question still make sense to you or not, and stay with the current law and guidance, which is the CPI, and you look at it and you decide. That's probably a helpful fork in the road before you work it too hard. But I did want to make sure you heard we're not pushing in any way on this. We're just trying to give you some ideas of where you could look at it differently. That's all.
Well, I'll just make one last comment. Thank you for that, Jack. That's very, very helpful. And I think for me, I would prefer the status quo than making any change today. I think that would make more sense than turning it into a very complicated policy exercise that wouldn't really play out until we were at a different place in the overall funding plan.
Well, and maybe one approach that we could take along those lines is rather than, because what happens now is that Milliman does an analysis of the death benefit and what the change in CPI is and what the resulting increase would be, and then what the cost would be of different approaches to it. And we could still do that same kind of thing, and then we could also indicate what the impact would be on the funding of the plan. Right. And then you decide, okay, what do we want to do? We could do this and have this impact on the plan or not,
Right.
and then you have complete discretion without changing any, without changing the policy. You can do whatever you want to within the limits of the statute.
Yeah, that just makes a more informed actuarial analysis.
Yeah.
I have some worry, the more detail and process you add to this, you're adding a momentum when you really were trying to make this a permissive discussion. So we could definitely do just what Ed said, is get you that added analysis so you see the connection to the funding, rather than just a simple, it costs $200 million to do it kind of number, which is what we're doing now with you.
So I have several people in queue, but I just want to clarify. So we would be able to leave the policy as it exists,
Yes.
but potentially get some additional information to understand what the impact of any action would be on our funded status.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, and the issue is that, I mean, right now, the actuary makes a recommendation around the benefit. I would guess, although I think Nick's here, he could speak to this, but I think if there was a specific policy, there'd probably be basically a recommendation, but it's not necessary. I mean, you can sort of make your own decisions based on the information we provide. And he would say, this is the consequence of doing this, and you decide how you want to handle it.
Okay. Okay, so I've got Paul, and then Grant, and Betty.
So a lot of my thoughts are similar to Raina's. I think we tend to have, when we talk about actuarial things, we tend to not talk about volatility. So we've got this nice straight line that we got a little bit of negative amortization, and then we start going back up. When we talk about investments, PCA talks to us about don't reach the 64% level. And here we have a proposal that would say that if we get down to, 60, 4.8% that were good enough to be able to provide the benefit. First of all, I didn't understand where these numbers came from because we're 68.5% funded as of 2014.
Right.
So the likelihood that we're going to be 64.8% funded a year later is probably pretty high, I would think, right?
Well, that was the number, you remember, these are the numbers that we developed when we did the funding plan, which was based on the 2013 valuation. So we were trying to just stick to the numbers that we identified when we did the funding
But what
plan.
I'm saying is that this policy would pretty much automatically.
Well, for next year, if there was no change in the assumptions, yes, then if this policy went into effect, there would be automatically an opportunity for an increase in the benefit. Is absolutely
So
true.
I think that I have the same kind of concerns, which is that, you know, we shouldn't be making a mistake to say that a couple of good years means we're not going to have a couple of bad years, and or some really bad years as we've seen, and so. I would prefer probably not to put, I think just as Arena said, not to put it into a strict policy. But I think the reason is because if we were to do that, we would have to come up with, you know, something that really gives us tremendous amount of comfort that we're way beyond the point. And I think that might be too restrictive, because for me, something like that would be to say, you know, we're through that negative amortization period. I mean, we've got 15 years of negative amortization in our funding. And basically what our investment consultants are telling us is if we have a serious hiccup financially during that period of time, you know, we can really move in the wrong direction and not be able to recover. That's what they told us yesterday. And so I think we have to integrate that same perspective here. So, but I'm afraid that might be, you know, then might be locking in more of a restrictive rule than we want. And so, I'm not sure that we really get any place by creating a rule, because we're going to be debating the specifics of that rule a lot. But.
Okay. Grant?
Thank you. I guess I don't have real strong feelings about how we approach it. We've had this permissive policy with a single threshold related to CPI, and since 2002, with different compositions of the board, we've kept the funded status of the system in focus, I think. But when my initial reaction was that we're just adding an additional threshold that ties directly to our fiduciary duty to the system. And I'm wondering I share Irena's and Paul's concerns about the shall, or about the dropping out the shall, I'm wondering if your concerns could be allayed if we change where it strikes out shall in A, B, and C to may, or may only. So we may only adopt if. But if we make it clear in the policy that keep the status quo and make it clear that we're going to have an actuary analysis and we're going to consider the ramifications, I don't think that changes it materially for me.
Joy,
Oh,
If I
yeah,
may.
Brian?
this is, as Irena pointed out, this is very similar to the additional earnings credit discussion. The statute, that's what you're referring, our current policy is based upon the statute, and the statute is permissive, and it's based on CPI. So that's your starting point. And this is a policy overlay on how you're going to implement that statute. So the underlying, the points you made, and I think Irena made, are correct. That's what the statute just says, that it's permissive. And if it is adjusted, the shall is based on the CPI. So this is a policy overlay to that.
One more follow-up question. I should know this, but CalPERS lump sum death benefit, we hear from the certificated or non-certificated employees quite a bit who compare the two, but I can't remember. It seems like we never had these discussions at CalPERS, so my sense is that benefit is just
I don't
set.
think that's adjusted. I don't think it's indexed in any way. I'm
It's
not
just
certain, but I
set
don't
in
think it's
statute?
indexed, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Betty?
Thank you. I guess just having sat through quite a few hours talking about risk factors and risk mitigation strategies, I'm a little reluctant to just embrace another policy here. And I think what I'd like to see is to, recognize that we have a current policy in place, but to proceed with having the actuarial analysis. I'd like to see something come back. I'm not close to the idea, but I also am not ready to embrace a policy that just sets the direction for staff to come back and have us embrace policy where we have discretion to even adjust it one way or the other. But I would like to see what it looks like. So to have that policy overlay on the actuary analysis, I think could be more instructive should we decide to go there. But I think just our priority focus on the just keeping the hopefully a positive momentum towards the funding status is really my goal, and I think this is too premature.
So I think what I'm hearing is that perhaps what we want to consider in April is to not modify the existing policy, but come back with some actuarial analysis that would show sort of what discretion the board has to consider in terms of an increase, what impact that would have on our funded status. It's still, the board would still have discretion to look at that information and make a decision about whether we wanted to proceed with any kind of change to the death benefit. But I sense that that's the direction we want to move in rather than modifying the current policy. Is that right?
And just so that you understand it, in April, normally, that is when you would set the death benefit. So, and as I said, we provide you an analysis of that. What we will do is Milliman will expand that analysis to incorporate what we've talked about in terms of, what would be the impact on the funded status of different changes to the death benefit.
Okay.
And without any change to the policy at all, would just provide additional information. Then you can make the decision in April in terms of to what extent you want to adjust the death benefit.
And then will that analysis be able to show sort of, degrees of
We can,
of
yeah, we
change
can have,
we
and
could
what we
make?
show now is like a full adjustment has this cost, and 1% adjustments have this cost, half of the adjustment has this cost. We can provide those same different alternative approaches and what impact it has on the funding of the plan. So we'd provide that additional information, and we could, we can project that impact on the plan, so you can see, okay, if we do that, we're still ahead of schedule, we're not ahead of schedule, and then you can make your decisions based on that.
That-
We can have them here for sure, yeah.
Thank you. Let's see this.
In April, oh, you'd be here for the evaluation, right? He's here for the evaluation anyway. You're right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, any additional information. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yes, please.
Dave Davini, retired school administrator. I think has been traditionally the responsibility of this committee and the board to protect and enhance member benefits. The lump sum death benefit is a benefit that every STRS member has, whether they're active, retired. It is a benefit. We have a history, and you have policies which provide COLA and purchasing power protection in benefits for members. As a member, I think what I want the board to look at is by not adjusting year after year the lump sum death benefit, in fact, it loses purchasing power, it devalues. And what I would like to see is some assurance that you will look at the benefit and that, if possible, if funding is available, that benefit be given consideration for purchasing power and cost of living as other benefits within the system. And any policy which takes away from a careful look at can we increase this benefit, I think gets in the way. And I think you have the ability already within your present structure to look at that benefit every year. What members are interested in is enhancing that benefit and keeping that benefit as valuable as the legislation originally intended. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davini, and I think the direction we're going in will allow us to do the analysis that he recommended, so. Okay. Let's see, CEO report.
So, in terms of the executive officer report, you all have a copy of the latest fiscal year 14-15 retirement progress report. One copy is what is sent to the defined benefit members, and the other copy is what's sent to our cash balance members. We do this every year, and these are just kind of the latest versions that I wanted to share with you. One interesting point of data is that, last year we went to default electronic distribution, and we had approximately 15,000 members opt out. We are now up to, I believe, in the low 30,000 of members who have opted out of electronic distribution, so we will be mailing just north of 30,000 paper copies of the Retirement Progress Report to our membership. The annual update will run, I believe, this weekend, and the reports will be sent out after that. They'll also be available electronically on mycalstrs.com. And as Cassandra alluded to earlier, we are going to put together a list of reports that are statutorily mandated for us to provide to the board, some of which are very detailed, and in terms of the financial significance, fairly insignificant. So we'll put that information together for you so that you can review that at the October offsite. And that's all that I have. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you.
Just some additional follow-up on the retirement progress reports. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. As Andrew said, the MyCalstrs will have the online version copy of the annual progress report next week, and then it'll be for those people who had requested it be mailed out to them. It'll be mailed out in early October. The other aspect of the annual update process that we're now going into is the return of the excess contributions to DBS as a result of the change in the contribution rates for DB. You'll recall that all credible compensation initially gets the employer and the members pay the contribution rate set for DB, and then at the end of the year, since we don't know what goes to DB and DBS until the year is done, we have to return to the employer, and the employer returns to the member their share of the difference between the DB and the DBS contribution. We anticipate the RPR will identify for each individual how much their excess contributions are that will be returned to them. Yes, it will identify. You've got, I will tell you the average is about $7 because the contribution rate increase wasn't that significant this year. But it's about a $1.8 million total that will get returned to the member, and the employers are also going to get back their excess contributions. But the members will have identified in their retirement progress report what their total return is. If they've got multiple employers and there were multiple employers that paid in the DBS, which is less likely, but if it happened, that'll be available on MyCalstrs probably the following week or in the next couple of weeks. And at that point, the employers will also be told how much each employee is supposed to get back. But they won't actually get the money probably until early October. And we're communicating that to the members. If there's a problem, this is, go, if you have an issue, contact your employer. Because one of the things is that the contributions are paid on a pre-tax basis. Now it's going to be taxable income. So they may not get the full amount that we've identified, and because we don't know what's going to get withheld for taxes or other reasons. So they need to contact their employer, but their employer won't be doing anything probably until October. So, this is the first year we've had to do this. We'll see how well this goes, but I just want to make sure that the board's aware of that. The other thing,
Can I-
oh, sure,
I
yeah.
just- Is it all right if I ask some questions about that? So you're saying that when members get this electronically, because they'll get it in their
Right.
email, except for the 30,000 that chose to get it mailed to them, where will that show up on this report?
I believe this is the special message section. Yeah, because not everybody has,
Right.
only about half the membership would have something. So
Okay.
it's a special
And
message.
so we at CalSTRS are sending out a email or something letting members know there's special.
No, we're sending out it's embedded in the progress report itself. There's a special
So a member
message.
would have to know to look. I'm just, in general,
Sure.
again.
No, I know.
When I go home, I have 7 seconds to look at all my mail.
Right.
So I'm going blah. So I don't notice it. And not that, like you said, it's a de minimis amount for most people.
Right.
But I guess it's just one of those communication things that I always like to make sure we do. So there's going to be a special message in their retirement report. So we don't send any kind of heads up message, but it's something that maybe stakeholder groups will want to.
We send out a message that the RPR is available. And I guess I have to go back, talk to the staff. We could maybe incorporate within that.
No, I
didn't make it-
I just want to make sure
Yeah.
what we're doing and what other
Yes.
folks are going to need to fill in the holes.
We are
too.
proactively telling people the RPR is available. On the RPR, it has the individual information about how much they're going to be getting back, gross, at
So
least.
stakeholder groups can make sure to inform members about this little. I don't think a lot of people know about it or probably care about it, but it's one of
Yeah.
those things where I just want people to be clear.
Sure.
So then they could communicate, and then if because I think the concern in this whole conversation has been our district's going to return the money
Right.
to the member, right? That's
Correct.
kind of the
That's the
sticking
concern.
point.
Right.
So that helps that the member has the information, so they can go to
Yes.
their HR and say, "Where's my $7?"
That's right.
I want to buy that
My
latte at
$6.80.
Starbucks. I want my $7.
Right, after taxes. though.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
But we do have other communication, not individualized, but like around in the newsletters and, probably something online or, there's other places that we'll be telling people, and we have been telling people that this is going to be happening.
Gretchen's
but-
nodding her head in the back, so that's
Yeah.
good. Yeah, you're all over it, right, Gretchen? Okay,
That's
good.
right.
And then can I just ask too, I wanted to ask Andrew, when the connections, the CalSTRS connections, when do we send that out to people? Does that come out the
It's
same?
in the fall,
It's in the fall?
I think, I believe. Gretchen, do you remember?
Yeah, there's one in the fall and one in the spring, I believe.
And we're sending those out paper or electronically?
I'm speaking on behalf of communication. If you send them out, I believe that they're both hard copies and they are available online as well.
Right.
So they can do either one. but
Okay.
Typically, it's a hard copy initially.
Okay. Thanks.
The other thing, any other questions around that? This is one other item, is just in terms of the enrollments in pension too. Normally you have about 100, 120 enrollments a month, but we did this past spring and summer, we've done some more intense marketing and had a special website for people to enroll online. And we were able to more than double the enrollment rate in pension too. So using social media, using things that younger people are attracted to. I know. So anyway, so it's we've had some good substantial growth in pension too, and also we've added a number of districts and to a 457 plan. So there's definite progress being made on pension too. And that's all I've got.
Okay, agenda item 9, review of information requests. Scott?
Okay, I have 2 information requests. The first is that the board asked, or the committee asked that staff report back to the committee in the April meeting as to the status and progress of the pilot programs being implemented around the credible comp regulations. And second, the committee asked that staff provide an actuarial analysis as to how an increase in the death benefit would affect the funded status of the plan at the April board meeting, or at the April committee meeting when the death benefit increase is considered again.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item 10 is just our draft agenda for the next committee meeting in April. Any comments or?
You can delete item 3 then, because you wouldn't be changing the death benefit policy.
Okay, so item 3 won't be an action
Right.
item. But we would have the item just to hear the analysis.
Well,
on
no,
it.
the item is reflected in item 4. The adoption of the contribution and interest rates, factors, and benefits, that's included in that
That would
item.
be, okay.
Yeah.
So Sharon, I think think what we have on the draft agenda now is a second reading on the policy, but because we are not moving forward at this point with changing the policy, instead what we're going to do is under item 4, which is when we would, on a regular schedule, consider the adoption of the contribution and interest rates, factors and benefits. The lump sum death benefit is one of the items we would consider there, and that's when we would hear the actuarial analysis.
Since we're really just extending your analysis, making a deeper analysis.
Kind of under existing process, okay. Okay, let's see, any other statements from the public? No, then the meeting is adjourned.
We'll start at 10:45.
Okay, great.